All right. So, coming up next is our panel that's all about elevating MSPs. I am joined here today with a few of my favorite people.
Good to see you, my
So,
friend.
we've got
Pressure. That's
Jason
pressure.
Samples from Mail Protector. What were you saying, Jason?
That's pressure. Being some of the favorite people, that's pressure.
Matt Lee from Pax A and Tracy Erisco from Huntress. And so earlier, Robin said something I thought was very interesting and something that I think probably we've all talked about before, but just that MSPs have a really tough job, right? They get their sale, they get their customer, and if everything's going right and the customer doesn't hear anything, then they're asking, "Hey, what are you doing?" And then if something's going wrong, then the customer is yelling, right? And so I think communication is obviously one of the most important ways that MSPs can strengthen their relationships. And so we just want to talk about first, and let me know who wants to take this
Not it.
first. Bah, ha, ha. All right.
Yeah.
Put Jason on the hot seat. So, Jason, what is like one of your strategies helping communicating with your MSP customers to strengthen those relationships, right? So, finding ways to really get through and have meaningful communication that strengthens the relationships.
Yeah, I think it sets the groundwork, right? I think first you have to set the right precedent during the sales cycle. And then it's really making sure the onboarding experience is really that first part post sale that is so important, both to the MSP and then obviously to the software providers, most important part in the whole customer process. So that said, you got to make sure you're putting those vehicles in place and then truly seeking to understand, getting the feedback from the customer and the prospect and understanding what the problem is, right? Not necessarily um, the high level piece, but get understanding what they're saying and then getting that on a constant basis. And then the follow up piece, right? If you don't have a seat at the table, both for the MSP and for the software providers, like you're missing something, right? No, you don't want that vendor relationship. You want the non traditional, have a seat at the table, be a true advisor.
I like that. Matt, anything you want to add there?
I mean, without getting too out of the question asked of what do I do to specifically stay, on top of communications? I think the conversation when you talk about what is our chief trust officer believes in at PAX 8, right, is this understanding of having a 1-to-1 say-do ratio, right? That's the first piece of it is, and I think Tracy, this is something you live as a normal life ethos, right? Is having a 1-to-1 say-do ratio. If you say you're going to do something, do it. And then the second aspect of that is in the concept of having the hard conversations, right? Like I think that's the point that is tough to get good at is when someone's doing something not well. And a great example in cybersecurity is think about the shared responsibility matrix. In shared responsibility, you have this understanding that some parts my responsibility, but some parts yours, right? And one of the ways I've seen that done well is saying, okay, here's your tasks, Mr. and Mrs. Partner or client, depending on how you want to look at this. Here's mine. Here's where I've got a C or an A or a B. Here's where you have an F and a B and an A. Let's all get better at our parts or discuss those parts, right? And I think it's about just general having the hard conversations, right? So that'd be my take on it is reaching out and having the hard conversations where they're necessary.
And I think to add on that, Matt, the key there is making sure that relationship's already in place. You can't have a conversation that is hard like that until they trust you. You've
Right.
probably not made it all the way through the whole sales cycle without trust, but before
Sure.
trust even becomes a rapport you require to get there. Right, Cynthia, you and I have known each other for many, many years. In fact, I've known everyone in this panel for years, but we didn't all trust each other in the beginning.
Sure.
It was years before we started walking at 5 a.m, Matt.
It's true. That's true. And now we don't miss an opportunity. So for sure.
That's right.
This is a good call out.
So, quick question then, something that I don't think this was on your original list of questions, so sorry. I'm going to go ahead and throw a curveball. How do you open up those communications when maybe they haven't been opening your emails or you're looking for ways to get in front of them so that you can strengthen that relationship? You're trying so hard and you feel like you can't get their attention. What are some ways that you have found that you've been able to get your customers' attention that maybe MSPs can use to get their customers' attention?
You know what I'm going to say here. And it's the adage of what would Tracy do? And it's pick up the phone.
Gosh, I love you. Okay.
I'm
Yeah. I was
sorry.
nervous there for a sec. I didn't know the right answer, but now I'm on the
Right
same page.
answer is pick up the phone.
That's what I would.
I have a Slack emoji at Huntress, and if the answer is you should call your partner, they just put in WWTD, and everyone understands
I
that
love it.
we forget in this world of instant gratification and three-line text messages and Vimeo chats and all of the things, we're humans, and humans
Mhm.
require interaction and one-on-one. Like we require that, and we're not doing enough of it. So that is my answer to that. You cannot do it without engaging one-on-one, and that is picking up the phone when you don't need something.
Yeah, I think that's huge. That goes into that trust part, right?
Yep.
And showing a
All
little
right.
humility and vulnerability in that
Mhm.
conversation, right? Because Matt, you talked about the trust officers, right? And that's such an important component of it, right? Don't take yourself too seriously.
Transparency too, right? In that conversation. So yeah, both. That's the third component you've well sussed out.
All right. Love that. Okay. So then what role do cybersecurity vendors play in helping MSPs educate their clients, right? And I think we hear about this a lot. MSPs say, I just can't get clients to pay for this. I just can't get them to add these cybersecurity pieces on. So what role do we play in helping MSPs educate their clients about best practices and about cybersecurity hygiene? Matt's like, this is me. Please
Well,
let me.
I'm not, I don't work in a direct vendor one-to-one that's working towards that piece. I don't have anything to sell specifically. And what I would say is I'll take the antithesis. It's usually not about the clients doing things. It's usually about the MSP doing things, right? And I think that, the neighborhood watch program that Tracy and team are doing is all about that. It's all about like, get your house in order. I'm doing a project right now called The Hackening with Tom Lawrence and Jason Slagle and John Hammond, and we're looking at MSPs and seeing how their status and posture is. And I think the point is that vendors, I'll come to a point, is that vendors have a responsibility in education of that part too. It's often the best interest for a vendor to sell the MSP into how to sell their client and how to talk about risk and how to move forward with this and how to onboard and how to deploy and how to do all those things. But oftentimes the vendor doesn't spend any time educating on what the other parts of their world are and what needs to be done as both an MSP and a practitioner, both sides of that fence. So it's education, it's community, it's reaching out and being that arm to help and guide. And it's also in some ways us being the bad guy and asking for a higher standard and setting an elevated request and asking you to be better, at least in my opinion. So my thoughts are it's about educating you how to protect yourself so that that can then be transferred upon how you do the same things with your client. Which is kind of the way you've structured this, right, Cynthia, today to talk about how the vendors can talk with the partners, and that just is the just exposition of the partners into their clients' view, right, in this conversation. So,
And that
Jason?
accountability to deliver on those, right? So I think Matt, you nailed it earlier when you talked about having the hard questions, right, for the MSP to do that to the end user, right? That's important. But then also for the software companies to not overpromise, not oversell the solutions, right? If something's outside your realm, make sure that you're pointing to another prospect or to another customer and stuff, right? Make sure you're drawing those boundaries and having the humility to say, no, that's not us, right? This doesn't do everything and include mobile on and stuff, if you will. Because I think a lot of expectations over the years just get set wrong in the beginning, and whether it's a misalignment and things are just said wrong, or it's just a misunderstanding, right? That's what we have to understand, how the information is being absorbed by the client, whether it's at the MSP or down to the end user, and then making sure you're holding yourself accountable to those deliverables.
I think the last part of that I want to add on is meet them where they want to be met.
sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Every partner of ours has a different way they want to engage. They have a different way to absorb and learn. And if we don't do more than one method of education,
Yep.
then we're not going to hit everyone that needs to understand. And being somebody talked a little bit about if you're not the right partner, be as vendor agnostic as possible. Do we want to sell? Of course we do. But don't sell things that aren't necessary to people who don't need them.
Yeah.
Put them in the right direction. This ecosystem is not that big.
And so, Tracy, what are some of those ways when you say like meet them where they are, right? And that there's different ways to get this education across. What are some of the ways that Huntress is doing that? Some of those different avenues that you're taking.
And for us, we are doing a lot of thought leadership in the technical space. So we take our technical founders and our super scary technical dudes like John Hammond, and we place them in areas where those conversations go right over my head. I get about 10 minutes into, say, Tradecraft Tuesday is probably one of the biggest pieces where we educate community about upcoming and emerging tradecraft. That stuff falls right outside of my brain because I don't understand it. But for those technical people in the MSP space, that's an excellent way to engage with them because they want to understand what they're protecting against. Maybe business owners who are non-technical need to sit in on a Huntress Masterclass where we pair up with other vendors. I think we've got some coming up shortly, Cynthia, where we talk about the business use case for cybersecurity. For them, what tradecraft is doesn't matter. They don't understand it any more than I do, but they're running a business that needs to be secure. And then we look at a number of different things like trade show events. What are your quick fire pitches like we did this morning? What are the opportunities to speak from a stage in a way that gives those partners something they can pass on to their end users, whether that is instant response planning, like we just finished our fireside chat series on. So we have a number of different avenues for simple education.
The other thing I'll add to that that hasn't been covered is that some of the other ways you're doing is through gamification, right? Like even for that
Right.
other persona, and I've been a part of that now for 2 years, myself and Ethan Tancredi,
Mhm.
and you've been part of
Oh,
tabletop exercises,
Yeah.
personas, speaking to those.
Hard
oh
internet
no.
in Kansas.
Oh.
Oh, am I losing internet? You losing?
Love that.
In and out a little bit.
Yep. Oh,
I feel like we can
Jason,
play a game of whack-a-mole here right away.
I was about to say it is a little bit of a whack-a-mole. It's
And
go
I think
ahead.
one of the things both of them were highlighting too is the consistency, right? To make sure you're getting the partner feedback, but then you're acting on it and then you're enabling them downstream, right? You can't just do this point in time education. It's kind of like marketing campaigns or promos, right? If you're truly establishing yourself as a thought leader, that's a long time education process. And you just have to be
Mhm.
consistent about that through multiple vehicles, right? And then I'm going to go back to what Tracy said earlier. This is not a scary device. It's actually really, really cool. If you dial it, actually somebody answers on the other side. Just use it, right? I think the phone is just so, we've gotten so reliable on texting and email and all these pieces today
Yeah.
because it's simple, but it really removes the human element. And that is really, really important when you're trying to, one, keep that establishment going as far as the trust factor, right? But then continually build because if you're using it, email, text messaging stuff, so much gets misconstrued.
Very, very true. All right,
Trying to give
Matt.
Matt time, but he's
So
in and out.
still coming in and out a little bit. Okay, so then let's talk about the on the other side of that, right? We've talked a lot about okay, here's how Mail Protector and Paxay and Huntress talks to their clients, right? But how do you want MSPs to come back and talk to you because they're the ones actually out here hearing these objections or just on the front line sort of how do you want them to talk to you about your products and services and what they need? Obviously it seems like the phone is a big
I heard
who wants
So
to
someone
take
say to us that we didn't have phone support back in the early days. And I said, "Did you call me?" And they said, "Yeah." And I said, "Did I pick up the phone?" And they said, "Yeah." And I went, "Oh, phone support." So there are a lot of different ways to approach a sales team, right? There's your basic open a contact us ticket. There's the pick up the phone. My email, although I don't read it every day, I am terrible at that, is definitely a lot of access points. But for me, more often than not, you'll find me on the road somewhere, right? How many of us, Matt, Jason, we sit down together at conferences all the time.
yeah,
Find
right.
me in a hallway. Start a conversation and let's figure out how to pick that up. I mean, text us doesn't matter. We take all things.
yeah. And the piece of that, like Tracy said earlier, right, is just being blunt, right? Like at the end of the day, we're trying to solve for problems and be solution providers too, right? At the end of the day, everybody on here is an MSP. We're just managing it through a software versus we're managing services through a software, right? So having that understanding and keeping that mentality between us, like there is a lot of um, equalizing, I guess, for lack of a better word, um, between the two, and we just want to make sure we're solving those problems. So that has to come from transparent communication and those sometimes uncomfortable conversations that Matt mentioned earlier.
Yeah. Okay, so then sort of as we wrap this up, right, talked about being thought leaders, and that's a great way to gain trust, right? Us as vendors to MSPs. So how do MSPs gain that trust and become thought leaders to their clients and to their prospects and their community? So what can they do to elevate themselves so that they can have these conversations?
Anybody
I
hear
go
me now?
first. Go ahead. Now we can hear you.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'll start
Oh,
with it. So,
so close.
yeah, we lost you again.
anyways, y'all
All
go.
right, Jason, do you want to answer this first or Tracy?
I think part of it, I think the first part of it is consumable information, right? So you have to put it in a way that's consumable, and you're not just verbal vomiting all over somebody or just putting too much information out there and putting it in a vehicle that they want to consume it, right? So short videos, things like that, and then build a story. Like it's so important to build the story and actually talk about what you're trying to do versus how you do it. Um, so that's to start off the conversation.
I think we don't, as vendors, always think enough about what is the problem they actually are trying to solve. So
Right.
we've got so much consumable material as vendors. You can have white papers, you can have podcasts, you can have, you name it, it's there. But if it doesn't solve for what they want to learn, it doesn't matter how much of it there is. So what are you doing before you develop your consumables? Before you go to deliver to an audience, what are you doing to determine what do they need? Because answering questions no one has isn't valuable.
Right.
Answering questions no one has isn't valuable. That's so true. Okay. Oh, I see Matt,
Can't hear Matt.
but I don't hear
But you're
Matt.
muted.
But your background is spectacular. So,
thank
I
you.
know, right? I'm like,
Oh,
I
now
like
we
I'm
hear
blurring
him.
We're
mine.
good.
I
Okay.
can't stand up to
Well,
that.
this
no,
is terrible, y'all. I would say the biggest thing is educate yourself on how to use technology because apparently that doesn't work. But after that, I would say the biggest thing about trying to be a thought leader is that you have to start showing that growth in education. And I think in general, the tide is rising. I think in general, we have had an extremely low maturity bar. All it takes to be an MSP is literally writing on a sticky note, MSP, putting on the outside of glass somewhere and filing a business permit. That's it. And so when you think about it, how do you become thought leaders? Elevate yourself above the crowd. Study, learn,
Right.
test, be part of the vendors that are sharing stuff. Dedicate time for your people to get smarter, right? I think it was Robin Robbins that may have even said, like, what if I educate my people and they leave? What if you don't and they stay? Right. And when you
Right.
start thinking
Yeah.
about this, most MSPs are just trying to get through. They have not approached it with those things. And I think if you just simply show iterative growth, show the humility that Jason brought up earlier, engage in partners like Tracy and team that are doing the things they are, and CyberQP that are doing the things they are, that are bringing education, and just continue to be better. That's it. I
Yeah.
think the conversation thing is there. The other piece I would say with rising tides lifts all boats is that sometimes there's things that are chained to the bottom of that. And if you've ever been part of a hurricane where someone anchored too firmly below where the water was going to rise, that boat didn't make it. And I think the call out and call to action I'd say to you is find a way to spend 20 extra minutes a week, an hour extra a week. Try to find time to give your technicians 20 extra minutes a week, an hour extra a week. Try to find ways to make KPIs tied towards their growth and capabilities. Reward people for improving processes, for making things better. Like all of those things are very tactical aspects. But at the end of the day, if you don't deal with this and loosen the anchor and make the boat right for ship rising, you won't be in that ship forever. The world's changing. So that'd be my call to action on how do you go educate is make it part of what you're doing, make it part of the important parts of your life.
Yeah, Matt,
Right.
I echo that. I would love to echo that just for a second because that work with intent is so important. I teach my teams everywhere I go. First, set your day up, right? Just give yourself some admin time at the beginning and the ending of your day. And it just teaches a winning environment, right? Like a lot of the things we all do, like if you just stay in the job and you don't give anything back, it's exhausting, right?
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, if you look and you collect your wins, call it from the keyboard to the steering wheel, back when we all used to go to offices, but you just kind of reflect on the day to say, did you do your setup? Did you read an industry article? Did you get the things done you wanted to, right? And if you do that, it's very motivating to come back the next day. And that goes to carving out that time Matt spoke about earlier. It's super important. Invest in yourself.
I want to challenge everybody here today. One of the things that I did when I came to Huntress was build a professional and personal development program for everyone on my team. There is a requirement on my team to do 2 hours of PD every single week. It's not optional.
That's
It's
awesome.
built in, and they lead the charge on that until we get ready to look at career growth, and then their manager steps in and helps guide them to move to the next level of their career. Now, I work in sales. It's different a lot of ways than working in heavy technical space, but the concept is the same. They can't create growth if they don't learn, and if they don't learn, you're not doing your job as a leader.
That's right.
Yeah. Very, very well said. And then can we think of any other tactics that MSPs can do in their community, right? So maybe things within schools or Chamber of Commerce
Oh
or
yeah, it's huge.
podcasts, things like that. Some ideas there that are just, again, actionable advice, right? So
Yeah,
they definitely need to be giving more time, obviously, to everyone in their team. Ooh, Matt's ready. To everyone in their team. So that's not just, right? It's not just the owner, right? It's not just the technical leader learning, but everyone in the team is learning more about cybersecurity and cyber hygiene. But then how also can they take that out into their community?
yeah. I think this is actually the bigger point here. The world is shifting from buying from a particular ad or marketing hyperbolisness or those things to buying from personas, buying from thought leadership, buying from those things. And I think to your point, you're saying those end customers or end MSPs should go be in their community that they're trying to sell to and be that educative resource. Like I've seen amazing work come out of partners putting on lunch and learns. I've seen amazing work where, I mean, Huntress, you guys have done this, right? And same thing across the board of going in, educating their partners, go be at the Chamber of Commerce, start offering to provide resources. At the end of the day, MSPs, have you ever said, I wish my client would do MFA? Have you ever said, I wish my client would sign up and do these important things with MDR or whatever it may be? Then go talk about it. Go educate why. Go and do that as part of a community resource. I got on with an attorney today to talk about a 501c3. I'm starting with Robert Chiaffi. And when we met with her, we spent almost an hour educating her on the gaps in what is an MSP, educating her on the gaps of what do they do? What is cybersecurity? Is my McAfee okay? And I say that hyperbolisly, but that is the world. That is an untapped set of potential that you can go be the expert in. And don't let imposter syndrome get in the way. Don't let those things stop you. Just go and share the information with no other purpose but to educate, and you will rise the tide. And that means that when you go have that conversation with that next partner or that next prospect and say, hey, we need to do this, you're establishing yourself as an expert. You have citable things that you can give them that make you that in that authoritative aspect. And most communities don't have that resource. They don't have someone that's willing to do it. They don't have someone willing to get on stage. Look at me. I'm an engineer that gets up on stage and talks every day. I literally couldn't listen to myself back on camera for the first year I did this, right? So if you think that's your holdup, just go suck at it. I suck at it every day. Just look at halfway through this webinar, right? So like, the reality is go be that and get past yourself. Put that same humility in place that was talked about earlier, and go out and just say, hey, I'd love to be a resource and help. And if you have somebody
Yeah.
in your organization that wants to do that, go put them on that stage. Go let them produce that. Produce your podcast. Talk to your clients. Do those things. All right, I'll get off my pulpit before I fall and break
No,
my
you
neck.
nailed
No,
it. And it rises
think
all
it's
tides. It helps
beautiful.
with recruiting. It helps with the brand awareness. It's so important. You nailed it.
I endeavor to suck as much as Matt Lee.
I love you.
There
There
you
you
go.
have it, folks. We're
We're all
done
going
with
to
our
make
panel.
T-shirts. We're going to
Yes.
make
Oh Lord,
T-shirts.
please don't.
I love it. I love it. Okay. Well, I mean, that feels like the note to end on there, Tracy. That was perfect. We are done with our time. Any other little quick tidbits that you were like, oh, I really wanted to say this one little thing before Jared pulls us off the stage?
Do better. I think going back
Be
to what
awesome.
Matt said, it's
We
time.
love you.
Do better.
Yeah.
I think less focus on speeds and feeds and more focus on scenarios, right? Being
And the
able to tell that
outcomes,
story.
the desired outcomes, right? That's the point.
All right. And then
Thanks
I
so
would say
much.
lead
It's been
with
a
your
pleasure.
heart,
Thanks for
right?
having me. Good to see you guys.
Thank y'all so much for